Welcome back to Chemical Safety at Work. We're thrilled to kick off Season 2 with a fantastic guest, Katharine Hull, CEO of the Association for the Battery Recycling Industry. Katharine brings valuable insights into battery recycling, a critical topic as businesses face new challenges with battery disposal and safety. Today we'll explore battery hazards, recycling infrastructure, and the technologies shaping the industry. 2025 is a big year for chemical safety at work. We have exciting plans including more special guests, deep dives into key topics, and tackling the big challenges in dangerous goods storage. We're committed to delivering practical advice and expert insights to make your workplace safer and more compliant. In next fortnight's episode, we sit down with Hydro Tasmania WHS partner Adam Rosevear to get his insights into risk management and safety culture in the energy sector. Let's dive into our conversation with Katharine Hull and make 2025 the safest, most informed year to date. Yes, so can you just tell us about your current position and a bit about your background and experience?
So I'm the Chief Executive Officer for the Association for the Battery Recycling Industry, which is an industry association specialising in sort of the battery circular economy and particularly end-of-life management and battery reuse and remanufacturing. I came to this role, I'd had 15 years experience across government in a number of roles, including energy, water and planning and environment. And this role looked really interesting for me. I could still apply my government skills and help them with advocacy and discussions and work with government, which is really important for a heavily regulated industry like battery recycling. And I had a little bit of battery knowledge, but certainly not the technical detail that my members do. But that became a really good fit. And so I've been here now for 4 years and really loving it, really interesting space.
So when was ABRI established and kind of what's the purpose of the organisation?
ABRI was established actually almost 20 years ago in 2008. It's been around for quite some time. Its initial focus was really on battery stewardship and getting support for end-of-life battery management, which they very successfully achieved with the establishment of the B-Cycle scheme, which has spun off into a separate entity and is still working very hard to promote end-of-life battery management there. And ABRI itself now has a much stronger focus on regulatory engagement with government to support safe and sustainable battery transport and management and recycling at end of life.
How has the mix of the battery mix changed since ABRI began to now? You've seen a bit of a shift over those years, the organisation?
Yeah, so there's been a really big shift. And lead-acid batteries have always been around for a long time. So, your car starter batteries, but they also go up to 1 tonne or more industrial-type energy storage batteries. And even the practices around management of lead-acid batteries have really changed over that time period. And the big growth sector is lithium batteries, particularly in the energy storage and electric vehicle and mobility space.
So you mentioned lithium there. What are the main types of batteries being used by Australian businesses today?
Oh, it's never ending, right? The range of products with lithium batteries, nobody knows the entire list. So it goes from really small ones in appliances or power tools or electronics or anything that uses is remotely operated, through to really big energy storage batteries, which, can be 40 tonnes or more when they're grid connected. So you're talking about something that might be a kilo or two up to 40 tonnes. So it can really vary. And when you think about industrial uses too, right? So forklifts, industrial machinery, backup power systems, the range is massive.
And what are the current requirements for the disposal of battery types these days, and does it change from state to state?
There's no mandatory requirements to recycle lithium batteries at the moment, which is unfortunate. Having said that, there's a lot of companies who have really good practices in recycling those batteries at end of life, and you see some real leadership from some of the manufacturers in doing that. Unfortunately, that's not across the board, so we know some are incorrectly disposed of or poorly handled at end of life. It really comes down to what commitments the manufacturer's got to a circular economy and recovering those materials. Lithium batteries are fully recyclable, So we can recover the critical minerals and other products out of the battery. The challenge is getting the batteries from the end user to the recycler safely at end of life.
And what are the hazards that are associated with improper disposal of batteries?
So with all batteries, right, there's always a toxic and a chemical risk to the environment. Those risks will vary. Also potentially human health as well. If you think about lead acid batteries, you don't want people inhaling that lead. Then with lithium batteries, there's also the extra risk of fire. And many people will have seen that, waste trucks on fire, lots of reports about waste infrastructure on fire through incorrect battery disposal. So it's really important that that's stopped and the batteries are sent in the right direction.
Are there any certain types of organisations or businesses that you think have a particular need to improve or increase their focus in this area now, the end of life of their batteries?
I think all organisations, this decarbonisation, shift in energy use to using more batteries, I think it's important for all businesses. Also thinking about appliances and equipment that you use now, the portable, everything's portable, right? So it doesn't have a cord. So what's powering that? A battery. So I think for all businesses, it's really important to sit there and go, what products am I using that have a battery, which will be very varied, and then how do I manage those batteries? How am I collecting and managing those batteries at end of life? And that stock take should be happening anyway, right, as part of a risk management procedure for the batteries.
So can you talk us through some of the different benefits and then the hazards associated with the most common battery chemistries that or industries are using?
There's three things to consider when purchasing a battery, and I'd definitely be encouraging people to talk to their retailer or distributor. I'll talk to it generally here. You've got to look at safety, cost, efficiency, and what's fit for purpose. So each battery chemistry has different characteristics in how it will perform, its response times, length of service, weight's a big factor. Lithium batteries can often be much lighter. So you really need to assess what's the best battery type for your situation.
Are there unique disposal requirements for those different types of batteries and battery chemistries?
Yep. Again, I'll talk to the general. Clearly with lead acid batteries, you don't want to spill. You don't want the lead coming out. You need to think about what protective requirements you have to prevent that, or if it does happen, minimise the risks of contamination or it spreading too far. Lithium, the clear risk is fire. So how do you manage that?
With battery recycling, do you generally have recycling facilities doing multiple types of batteries, or are they usually split into different types?
Recycling will be done by chemistry, and recycling's actually there's a number of steps in the process, from collection of the batteries from the end user. Sometimes they might go to a consolidation site, so you can get a large truckload to send to the recycler. It's all about minimising the transport costs, but again, you'll hear me talk about this a lot, safety, 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 also about making sure that's all happening safely. Lead acid batteries, lead acid and lithium, in some respects, the processes are a little bit similar in that the batteries will go to a recycler, they'll be crushed. Out the back of a lead process will come a lead paste that will then go off for further refining, made into ingots, and that's all reused, and quite often that could be put back into your car battery. You won't even know about it. Lithium batteries, at the moment the technology actually breaks down the batteries. You get a thing called a black mass or a mixed metal dust out the back, and that's like a cocktail of elements, if you like, and then that'll be further separated into individual raw materials, again reusable for new batteries or other products. There's a lot of work happening in the lithium space to improve the sustainability of that process. So ideally they'd really like to go to just recovering the cathode straight out of the battery and putting that straight back into a new battery, and that's what's happening. The other challenge with lithium batteries is the size. So if you're talking a big grid scale, 40-tonne, there's a whole lot of different challenges with those batteries in de-energisation, disassembly, and pulling out the cells so they can be safely recycled. So again, depending on the size of the battery, there might be a few extra steps in that process. The really small ones that you see, in your mobile phone or the little button batteries, they'll just go straight through to crushing, even if they've got plastics and other things on the outside.
So what are some of the biggest constraints to seeing this process happen from both sides of getting organisations to bring their batteries to be recycled, and then also from the perspective of facilities being set up to do it?
So lead acid's a really well-established industry here. There's value in those batteries, so people will get paid generally for taking them back, and then they go into the recycling chain. Lithium's a different proposition, and the biggest challenge at the moment is the logistics part. There's been an excellent job done by recyclers. If you think about all those collection networks and supermarkets, funding and setting them up, and they'll then get a rebate through the B-cycle scheme. But the larger format batteries, there's still a lot of work to go. It's still pretty new, right? There's not a lot coming through at volume. So there's still a lot of work to go in how are we going to scale up that industry, what investment's needed to scale up, what does the infrastructure map look like? So both of collection, consolidation and recycling locations. So you minimise the costs, minimise the transport costs, but always, as I say, safety is always critical in all of this. So how do you do that in a safe environment? And you don't want those batteries sitting around for any length of time, right? You want them moving through the system quickly.
Yep, absolutely. And so it requires a bit of government support, a bit more focus from the government, do you think, at the moment, a bit more financial?
I think there's a whole range of tools that need to happen. One's clearly funding, because the volumes are not coming through, feedstock volumes are not coming through at scale, and that's just getting through to the crushing stage, right? There's a whole other question about recovery of the minerals from the critical minerals from the black mass. There's also, and this is a global challenge, what is best practice safe storage and handling for these batteries at different volumes, different sizes? What does a good consolidation site look like? What does that infrastructure mapping network look like, as I said, that delivers safety and sustainability and is cost effective?
So looking forward to the future, what do you see will evolve with new technology, or what sort of batteries do you think will become most prevalent?
Oh, I think if I had that answer to that crystal ball, that would be great. I mean, lithium's going to be with us for a while, right? I guess some of the interesting developments that are happening, there's a lot of work happening on whether you're improving lithium battery safety and looking at different chemical compositions in that space. You see other batteries emerging, particularly in the Australian context. Vanadium's, an interesting one where, again, some of that's about fire risk, but some of that's about local know-how and expertise, and we have the resources. But again, every battery type kind of has different strengths and weaknesses. So I think there will always continue to be a mix. We expect lead-acid batteries to be around for a long time, right? They're a proven performer. They do a good job. They don't have the same capacity necessarily as a lithium battery, but again, what's fit for purpose for what you need.
And what are the most pressing challenges do you think that organisations face when disposing of their batteries at end of life?
Convenience and cost. So trying to find where you can take it, and there are recyclers, right, who'll take it, but it's all that thing around drop-off, consolidation, making it simple for people. Education is going to be a big factor in this. Where do you take it? How do you take it safely? How do you handle it? If you've got to store it on site for a small amount of time, what do you do? And those networks are going to take time to get established, right? So what's happening today, it could be quite a different framework in, 1 to 3 years' time.
And inconvenience and cost, those are things that lead to organisations cutting corners and that might see batteries piled up behind a shed somewhere, that sort of thing, unfortunately, right?
And that's a huge risk, right? Huge risk to anybody who's doing that.
How does the industry approach education to consumers about proper battery disposal to reduce that contamination and the hazards in waste facilities?
The industry itself is sort of quite far down the value chain. So we work quite closely with parties who are likely to be holding those batteries at end of life. So if you think of automotive batteries, they'll be with the automotive sector, with service centres or scrap. So it's a case of us working with those entities, and OEMs have a are doing a lot of work in this space as well, right? Because they're part of that network. Energy storage, installers, like if you think of household energy storage, installers are going to be key players in that chain. So what do you need to do to help them understand that framework and which entities are going to be most effective in delivering that? So the recyclers themselves are very much B2B type businesses because they'll deal on volume. So it's working with those consolidation points or experts, right, through the chain.
How do you see technology shaping the future of battery recycling, particularly in terms of safely reclaiming critical minerals like lithium, cobalt and copper?
So there's a couple of things happening in the lithium space. There's work and research happening on how to use less energy in that process. So there's two processes by which you can recover the critical minerals. Pyrometallurgy, which is kind of heating it up really hot to separate or burn off elements. This is the non-technical explanation, by the way. That's obviously very energy intensive, so it's a big focus on how to reduce the energy use in that. There's hydrometallurgy, which is a chemical process, so how do you leach out the elements? Again, how do you use what you might call greener or less environmentally damaging chemicals? And then there's the direct recycling process, which tries to skip those steps altogether and just take the cathodes out and reuse them. So there's a lot of research. We've just published on our website. We've got a working table of research happening across Australian universities at the moment. Australia has a natural advantage in all of this because a lot of it draws on mining sector technology. Not exactly the same, obviously got to be adapted, but there's a strong knowledge base here that's really helping industry grow. And I'm aware of at least 3 companies who've developed technology here to recover those critical minerals, and they're exporting or testing that technology overseas.
And do you have any advice for businesses to safely store and dispose of large-scale batteries while adhering to best practices?
That's a rapidly evolving space. We always suggest, talk to your dangerous goods experts. ABRI's got a number of members in this space. There's a number of specialist companies, energy storage companies, or when I say energy storage, not the battery energy storage, companies that can support safe storage of the batteries. Just a bit confusing there. Seek advice from the relevant experts, and your risk management process will be a key step to what are the risks, therefore thinking about how do you identify solutions or mitigation measures to that. And I strongly encourage, for companies with larger volumes and B2B processes, there's a list of recyclers on the ABRI website. People can always reach out to ABRI. I can put you in touch with a number of the recyclers who have the specialist resources to discuss what individual batteries or what volume or what stock of batteries do you have to help with the management there.
So, Katharine, can you tell us, are there any ongoing or upcoming collaborations between ABRI and government bodies to create clearer, more supportive policies for the battery recycling industry?
Yes, there's a lot of work going on, and not just with ABRI. As I've mentioned already, there's huge challenges in the waste sector from incorrect disposal of batteries. So there's a lot of work happening in that space around producer responsibility. So what should producers be doing? Right through to there's been funding out of a number of the state governments for recycling projects across the country to help the infrastructure get up and running in that space. There's a lot of discussion around safety guidelines, safe handling and storage. So there's a lot of work happening in different spaces. Might be targeted at a specific battery segment like consumer or embedded, or a lot of work happening in the micro-mobility space at the moment. That's also being driven by battery quality risks, to work happening with those larger batteries around energy storage, household energy storage. And there's a number of government inquiries have been into electric vehicle transition, of which recycling is part of those discussions.
Do you see regulations around disposal of batteries being implemented soon? And I guess, what kind of work needs to be done in that area?
I'm not sure when this podcast's going to go out, yes, but everyone's clearly watching the December 2024 Environment Ministers meeting, where they'll be looking at this issue in depth. As I say, driven by where the areas of greatest risk are at the moment, which is the waste sector, and how to mitigate or get rid of that risk. So, yes, it's a very live discussion across government and not just the battery recycling industry, all industry at the moment, about how do we reduce the risks to workers in the waste sector.
So in the ideal world, what would be mandated in terms of disposal of batteries?
So an ideal world for ABRI members is, we're strong supporters of mandatory producer responsibility, but that's not going to be one size fits all. So where you might have a scheme for small batteries, your management of a grid-scale battery and the stakeholders in that space might be a very different proposition to, a couple of kilos to several tonnes or tens of tonnes of battery. You're going to need different processes, different ways of doing it. Clearly, battery tracking and tracing will be a really important part of all of this as well. I guess our other strong view is there's a lot happening overseas. We should leverage what's happening there. Don't try and reinvent the wheel if we don't need to.
So who's the global leaders in this space?
The European Union's clearly a leader with its battery passport. India's also introduced a mandatory scheme for electric vehicle. There's a number of states in the United States of America who've done various different schemes. Nobody's unfortunately done it exactly the same, but there's some good precedents and frameworks that can easily be drawn on. And given most of our products at the moment are coming from overseas, it would make sense to adopt, processes they're already using.
And what incentives or measures do you think would be most effective for encouraging businesses and consumers to comply with safe battery disposal practices?
That's a very live discussion at the moment because unfortunately there's no perfect solution. So, you'll hear lots of discussions around like a container deposit style scheme. The key question around that is safety. You don't want people holding batteries in their house. So, the key things we always look at in all these options at the moment without a perfect is convenience, cost and safety. The sustainability will come out the other end, right? Because if you collected them, they're not going to landfill, you don't have the toxic chemicals and the leaching, you don't have the fire risks. If you've got the collection network going, then the batteries will be going through to the recyclers and we know we can recycle them and hopefully that chain will be a safer way to get the batteries out of the system. And again, here I'm really talking about lithium. Yes, you want to collect the zinc, carbon and alkaline batteries as well, but the key focus at the moment is lithium.
Do you think there are probably some struggles already, but with the kind of rapidly increasing rate that you see things like electric vehicles and BESS systems coming into the country, how are recycling facilities keeping up? And are there issues and risks around them having to store batteries coming to them before they go through recycling as well?
No, they'll turn the batteries over. Once the batteries get to a recycler, they'll be moved through the system. They're obviously not going to be in and out really quickly, but they do move them through the system quickly. The environmental and the planning laws will also require that as well. Recycling is an inherently risky business just by the nature of it. So that's not really, once they get to that space, they're in a pretty specialised and contained environment and, there's a very high awareness of the risks and what needs to happen and how to mitigate and manage them. And the facilities are built, right, to manage large volumes of batteries. They'll have caps on how much they can ever store at any one time, and they'll have, we did a lot of work with the Victorian EPA a few years back looking specifically at lead-acid batteries, right, and how fast they move through the system because you don't want, as you mentioned, batteries being stored.
Can you tell us a little bit about the role, of EPA or how you engage with that space?
So we engage with EPAs. We're a small organisation, right? And not as many states and territories as some other jurisdictions, but we're working closely at the moment with particularly Victoria, Queensland, New South Wales as they consider what solutions are needed to address these risks in waste facilities. It's a very cooperative and collaborative approach. Everyone's still learning in this space, right? It's still, lithium battery technology has been around for a while, but coming through at scale, the battery sizes are changing, the challenges are changing. It's, how do we get good outcomes for everyone?
That's great. You work together on those things.
We might not always agree, but it's a good it's a collaborative and it's a positive relationship.
Everyone's working towards the same goal at least.
Yeah, everyone's working towards the same goal, right?
Is there anything else you wanted to cover, Katharine?
I should give a plug, that's all right. We've got our conference next year, so if you guys should think about coming
Absolutely.
along.
And whenabouts is that, Katharine?
It's the 17th of July in Sydney. It'll be more, it won't be the I'm a store, how do I manage my batteries type approach, right? It'll be just more of the high level discussions, but definitely worth coming along.
So it's a program of different presentations, or how does it work?
This will be our third conference, so it's just one day because we're still fairly small. We do quite a few panel sessions because it is an open discussion around pros and cons, different challenges, different solutions. Last year there was a big focus on e-waste and insurance. We had a specialist speaker out from Europe talking about building recycling plants in Europe. New South Wales EPA came along and chatted about what government was doing. Penny Sharps actually said she'll open our conference next year, so that's great news. And we're looking for another international speaker at the moment, so hopefully confirm that in the new year. So it's a bit of a mix of panels plus presentation. The other really interesting thing from last year, we had Edith Cowan University and IAG talking because they're looking at how to manage batteries that have been involved in a car accident, so that go off to the wrecker. Because normally the car companies, right, they get a payment that go to scrap. You get paid through the scrap system for the wrecked vehicle. But it's a bit of a different proposition now. If you've got a scrapped EV, what happens, all those sorts of things. So they're doing a great project through iMove CRC on that.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, that's an interesting point. A lot of typical scrapyards aren't going to want to manage a lot of large damaged lithium-ion batteries.
Well, they might, right? But everyone's trying to work out, because it's new, what's the commercial model? How do you do it? What does good look like? It's new for everybody.
So the attendees, who's it open to and who do you expect?
It's open to everyone. Last year, I think we had about 5. We had every government across Australia except Western Australia and Tasmania. And I don't blame people for not travelling. It's expensive, right? And a number of research institutions, so CSIRO, Edith Cowan, plus industry, plus a broader segment of players that we sort of connect with in terms of they might be technical specialists or law firms or people who provide advisory or kind of like those periphery services present. So it's quite broad because the topic's quite broad, right? By the time you have every single battery application, every single chemistry, yeah.
Yeah, well, thank you very much for joining us on the podcast today and diving into battery safety, which is always a hot topic. These days when we're talking about dangerous goods, it's always, the primary topics when we go to conferences or various events around the country. So, and something that a lot more businesses are having to try and manage and will increasingly need to. So, yeah, thanks very much for providing that insight.
Thank you very much, Katharine.
You're welcome.